I think that the 10-year vision has helped us immensely in lining up the so-called true north. And I think going back to that, continuing to dust it off, continuing to think about it. I do think, Bobby, a lot of guys, and anytime I'm doing like leadership speaking with church planners and stuff, you've heard me say this, I use the little thing, hey, blah, 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 you're going to get in your car tomorrow and you're going to wake up and you're going to drive to the office. And then I ask the question, what are you trying to do? Mm-hmm. And most people's answer is going to be like, well, I'm trying to write a sermon, or I'm trying to, and it's like, no. Like, what are you trying to do? Ultimately, what is the point of you driving to the office to do your sermon or to do a meeting? Or like, what's the bigger goal that you're after here? And a lot of people just cannot answer that question.
Mm-hmm. This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go. All right, hey everybody, welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast. I'm Pastor Bobby, and I'm here with Pastor Andrew, and we're going to have a couple episodes coming up here. I think this is really fitting at the beginning of the year, ending one year, starting another year, to talk about like how do we organizationally do planning for the upcoming year, thinking about, our long-term vision, thinking about, things that we're praying that God will do over the next 2 to 3 years, and then trying to focus on certain things in the upcoming year. And then we'll do an episode on, once you have some of that stuff set, how do you actually go about that from a week to week, month to month? We all know, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're a pastor or ministry leader, or even if you just, have a, business job or whatever, it's so easy to get kind of pulled so many different directions, mm-hmm. You get that email, somebody complaining, or you get, some problem arises, although it may not be a huge problem. And it's so easy to get pulled in all these different directions. And just having some sort of strategic planning tool to plan for the upcoming year, but then also to kind of hold yourself accountable throughout the year. It just helps you stay on track.
Right.
Our leadership team here at Mercy Hill, there's 7 of us. We had an opportunity right before the year ended. We did a 2.5-day planning retreat to really think about, it's really kind of planning for the upcoming year, but when you do this, it's always good to kind of look beyond, the upcoming year. And so we're just kind of fresh off of that. And I know if you're listening to this, your business does this, or your church probably does this in some way. We've done this in lots of different ways, wouldn't you say, Andrew? I mean, we've probably every single year from the time our church was really small to where we're at now, it's changed every year. The big concepts, though, of, thinking further down the road and then thinking a little bit closer and then thinking upcoming year, those have kind of always remained the same. I would say now there's just more complexity because you're leading more people in the process. Early on, it was just me and you and maybe Pastor Jeremy and a small handful of staff we needed to communicate the stuff to. So we've had to kind of develop more systems around this as time has gone by. But it's just an important thing to kind of stay on track.
And I think, man, that there's only 2 groups of people that don't need to do this, okay? Or maybe I should say aren't doing it. Some folks are just straight up aliens. They're just alien visionaries who also can instill crazy amounts of execution and traction. And I remember, I've heard Larry Osborne say 100 times, man, he never had goals, he only had a direction. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, that's fine for you, Larry. You know what I mean? Their church over 40 years grows to 10,000. They're obviously doing something really right. And maybe they don't need a system for this. Maybe he just intuitively is the system himself. But the other group of people that's not doing this are people that are not the alien and they're not doing it. And I think that's where you can really just get stuck and have a lot of the power of creating goals, creating vision, and then putting feet to them. It can just kind of slip away from you because you don't have a system. And I think we have decided early on, we don't feel like we're aliens in terms of vision or traction, or execution. And so having some systems that have changed, we've used Vision Frame, we use EOS now. I mean, we've used different things, but something that tries to focus us on that idea of lining up what you're doing today with what you're trying to see happen this year, with what you're trying to see happen in 3 years, with what you ultimately want to see happen in 10 years. I think for the mere mortals among us, like me and you are, it has got to be one of the most effective ministry tools to just kind of keep everything online. Because as you said, you get more ministry experience or you get more resources, and you can just end up doing 1,000 different things. And it's like, but are those things you're executing on actually moving the needle for where you ultimately want to go? That's where I think some kind of planning like this really is helpful.
Yeah. So we just got done doing ours. I feel like it was one of the more effective ones that we've done. It was definitely the largest team that we had a part of that. And we have started using, like you said, there's lots of tools out there, and there really are a lot of tools out there for this. I mean, there's certificate programs in terms of like how to do this type of organizational leadership. And we've started over
40, you said 4 disciplines.
Yeah. I mean, the book 40X, 4 Disciplines of Execution, vision frame stuff and kind of the Christian world. There's probably lots of kind of other nonprofit ones or even for-profit type stuff. We have been using over the last couple years. This is the first year we really kind of went all in on the planning process. It's called EOS. And the thing that I like about EOS is it's kind of an all-encompassing tool. The goal of EOS, it's not made for any type of organization. It's churches, nonprofits, I mean, anybody, big business, small business. But the goal of EOS is to be kind of a full operating system for the organization. What we had been doing is like, okay, for vision, let's use this tool. We read this really good book, for, executing, on 90-day goals. We have this book over here, for creating a staff culture. We read this thing over here. We talked to this person and they're using this, so let's use that. And that's all fine. I mean, that's what a lot of people do, but it just felt like it got to the point where we're using so many different tools. Sometimes it's hard to kind of get that downstream with the rest of the staff. It's like, hey, read these like 9 books on this particular thing. So EOS is sort of an all-encompassing with that stuff. So anyways, so kind of going back to, we did this just recently. We started with, the kind of planning process for the upcoming year. And this is sometimes hard to do, but we started with, okay, how did things go over the past year? And that's a really easy step to kind of skip, personally, as an organization, because there's areas where you didn't execute or things didn't happen the way that you wanted them to happen.
Right.
And what most of us naturally do is we just kind of get on to planning next year, right? We don't look at like, okay. And, this is why the EOS stuff's been helpful, because it kind of forces it out of you. Okay. We had 7 goals for last year, or 5 goals, or whatever it may be. Let's look at the church's revenue. Let's look at attendance. Let's look at baptism, like whatever those different things we're going after. And let's analyze how we did, where things went well, where things didn't go well. Like, speak to that, because sometimes that process can kind of be revealing of maybe things that need to change for the upcoming year. Yeah,
I mean, the first thought that comes to my mind is we all do this organizationally because it's very easy without accountability to do this personally. So, if you use Vision Frame or you use some system of creating, 90-day kind of rocks for yourself, and they don't happen, nobody else knows about it. It's just you and the piece of paper in front of you. I mean, to me, it's just the easiest thing in the world to just kind of erase it and kind of move on, and just kind of dream the next one. Now,
people do this with their personal finances, where people are like, honestly, I don't want to look at it.
Right.
Like, I don't, because I kind of don't want to know how good or bad it is. Right. And I just want it out of sight, out of mind, and just move on.
Yeah. Or just not really critically engage it. Mm-hmm. Why didn't it happen? And I was, we right at the end of the year, you and I went to Pigeon Forward doing some investment stuff out there, and it's like, I had that on my yearly goal, and so I was so wanting to get out there, to be able to, but it's just me and my little piece of paper, me and my little system of like, I wanted to make sure I checked that I had gotten out there to see the new house and stuff. But there's other things like that maybe just that one person sitting there with their little EOS planner or whatever it is and making that check mark is not enough accountability. So the book Tribe of Millionaires that we've, I've used it with my reading group. I know you've read it. It just sometimes these business books, they just end up using Christian principles without even knowing it really. But it just talked about how accountability is the superpower of moving your life forward of success, right? Which we would say in the Christian life, that's that way. It's why we say there's no such thing as being a Lone Ranger Christian, because you need the accountability of people to hold you on track. What I thought was so powerful about what we do in review is that we don't do it individually, is my point. It can't just be one guy looking at his little planner, did I hit this or did I not hit this? There is a power in the accountability of sitting in a group at the highest level. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a small church, that's fine. It's like, man, whatever your leadership team is or whatever your deacon team is, but there's some kind of accountability of, did we hit this? Did we not hit this? We didn't hit it. We got to talk about why. Not to throw rocks, not to try to tear people down, but to make sure that we are going to be accountable for the things that we write
And
down.
Some people are unwilling to do this. Some churches are unwilling to do this because they basically put what we're talking about into the box of pragmatism, because they say, well, anything that happened or didn't happen this year, man, that's all in God's hands, and we're not gonna go and try to dig into like, man, why did we have this number versus this number?
Right.
I just think that's just kind of a faulty way to look at it, because some of the things, I mean, if we're honest, some of the things you may be analyzing over the last year are like, hey, maybe God did want us to do this thing. And if we're honest, we were afraid. And because of whatever was going on among us or in the church or some situation, we just had fear and we didn't step into that and we didn't step forward. And I mean, obviously there's grace and mercy for that, but I just think it's kind of faulty to be like, man, we're not going to look at why something happened or didn't happen because it's all in God's hands.
Well, I mean, that's the pragmatism thing. People want to throw rocks. It's very easy to do that. But I will tell you, if anybody has ever changed a strategy or course in their entire ministry life based on the results they were getting, which we all have done that, everybody has done that, then you are doing the pragmatic thing. You're doing it. You changed times of your Sunday school. You decided to go to 2 services. You decided not to do your vacation Bible school that late in August. You decided to do it earlier because that's when kids were actually out of school. Or if you've ever made a ministry decision based on the results that you got, you're doing what we're talking about.
Right.
It's just that you're not getting the power of it because you're afraid to step into it fully. And I think what we've tried to do through this podcast is let the air out of that balloon and just say, man, the things that we all are doing, let's don't have this facade. Let's don't fake the funk like we're not all pragmatists, because we are. So let's try to do it well to the glory of God.
Yeah. And so, like thinking about how the past year went, we had some things that went really awesome. We had a first-time guest goal that, when we had this planning meeting, we were on track to hit that, which was amazing. I think we had our highest baptism year ever as a church.
Is that right?
I think so.
Huh.
Over 300 baptisms.
Praise God.
Yeah. Well, we can go back and check that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I really think so. But
I didn't know it was that.
But there were some other things like we didn't hit. Like one of our key major goals was around the timing for our new facility. Right. Praise God, we are about to move in there, but we didn't hit it. I mean, we wanted it to be over the summer, and then it was our fall launch, and then it was our Christmas services, and we didn't hit that,
Right.
We didn't need to go deep analyzing that because we were already pretty aware what some of the issues were. But I mean, I think if you're going after big stuff, like there's going to be stuff that, man, went well, stuff that didn't go well. And one of the things I think, if you don't analyze that stuff, it's kind of the old principle of like, man, do we know why it went right? Mm-hmm. Do we know the things that were going well? Right. And sometimes the things that are holding you back, they're more organizational, I mean, growth barriers in churches, they're real, 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000, like those are real barriers for real reasons. Yeah. And sometimes if things aren't going the way that you want them to go, you may be hitting up against one of those barriers. The lead pastor may be involved in too much stuff or whatever it may be. Like there could be a common barrier that you're hitting. So I mean, Andy Stanley's quote comes to mind. If you don't know why it's working, you can't fix it when it's broken. Right. And I think the real high critics of pragmatism would say, but you can never know why it's working because it's a spirit thing, it's a secret thing or whatever. But I would just say, man, I would say you don't actually believe that,
because you do things like have a website. You do things like you do your Sunday morning service at 11. There's nothing in the Bible that tells you to do that. You could do your Sunday morning. You could do a Sunday service at 2:30 in the afternoon, out in the park with no air conditioning. But we don't do that. Mm-hmm. So we can act like we don't know why it's working, but we do things that are based on we kind of know why it works. Some of it. Now, some things we can't know, but to the extent that we can see strategy line up with the results that we're praying that God will give us, then I think what you're saying is exactly right. We need to think about why it works and think about what went wrong. Those things are not inerrant. I mean, you know, any type. I mean, cause and effect is de facto very, very fuzzy. It's just it's almost unprovable. But it doesn't mean you can't draw a lot of really good inferences and change strategy based on it.
Yeah. One last thing I would say about that I appreciate about EOS is, one of the phrases that they use is being willing to step into the danger when you're like discussing these ideas. And it's very helpful, if you have a leadership team, people may have different ideas on why things are going good or why things are not going good. And it can be hard, it can feel like it could, hurt trust or relationally, like if we're disagreeing. Hey, I don't see things the way that you see things, but overall, I mean, it's very helpful to be willing to kind of step into that danger and ultimately, hopefully it builds more trust, and the best ideas and stuff need to come out of that.
Right.
Yeah. So, after kind of evaluating the past year, I mean, one of the first things that we need to be going back to is, before planning for 2025, we need to kind of get beyond 2025 to think about, okay, where is it that we're trying to go?
Right.
We use 10 years. Mm-hmm. I heard it once said, like, a lot of this depends on the age of the organization and maybe some of the where the organization's at in terms of growth and like how long the leadership has been there, how much like leadership trust among the congregation there is. Sometimes young guys can be really filled with, gusto and vision, and they have a brand new church and they lay out a 20-year vision or a 25-year vision. It just doesn't seem realistic,
Right.
People are like, man, are we going to be able to get into a facility and get out of this school, and you're pitching me a 20-year vision. If an organization's more established, you don't want to just have a 1 or 2 year vision, because if that's the case, you're probably not thinking in a way that's strategic enough. You're not thinking long-term enough. And so we have landed on the last number of years having a 10-year vision. And so that's the starting place, when you're thinking about planning for the upcoming year, to make sure, man, everybody's on track with that 10-year vision.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's different schools of thought on this, right? Like, I've heard it said you never want to cast a vision that's longer out than your organization has been in existence. Mm-hmm. So if your organization is only 5 years old, you don't want to cast a 10-year vision. I think that's really practically like a good thing to do. Like, we didn't cast a 10-year vision until year 10.
Right.
And I was really excited about being able to cast that vision because we had hit year 10. And honestly, I feel like there was multiple factors. I think that the new building, I think that me turning 40, but I also think that being able to cast a 10-year vision, that something of those three things kind of all collided, and it really gave our church a massive boost over the last year and a half. So I think that that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it, though, and I do think there is some validity to this, that the level of detail needs to get way more complex and intricate when you're dealing with the 3-year. So like Cameron Harold in his book Vivid Vision, he advocates for only doing a 3-year vision. Don't do a 10-year vision. Now, we obviously don't agree with that, but his point is it's too far away. 3 years you can conceptualize in a way that would give you the ability to write down a lot of the rocks that we end up with a 3-year vision. So I understand there are different ways to think about it. I would say that the 10-year vision for us has been huge. I think it's been, and I would, if somebody's 3 years in, a 3-year vision can be huge or whatever, but, or 5 years in, a 5-year vision. I just think that whatever you can justify in terms of the longest horizon, and we really started thinking about this a lot during Vision Frame and Mancini's book, but, church unique. But I think that the 10-year vision has helped us immensely in lining up the so-called true north for Mercy Hill. And I think going back to that, continuing to dust it off, continuing to think about it. I do think, Bobby, a lot of guys, and anytime I'm doing like leadership speaking with church planners and stuff, you've heard me say this, I use the little thing, hey, blah, 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 you're going to get in your car tomorrow and you're going to wake up and you're going to drive to the office. And then I ask the question, what are you trying to do? Mm-hmm. And most people's answer is going to be like, well, I'm trying to write a sermon, or I'm trying to, and it's like, no. Like, what are you trying to do? Ultimately, what is the point of you driving to the office to do your sermon or to do a meeting, or like, what's the bigger goal that you're after here? And a lot of people just cannot answer that question. Mm-hmm. It's not the way they've thought about it. I think conceptualizing, like, man, I had a thing on my dash in my truck. I'm now driving a van, but in my truck stays parked. And it just says 5,500. Like, I want to remember whatever I'm doing today, including this very podcast, is connected to our church's growth and sending.
Yeah, and another thing that having that vision does, I think a couple things, but one of the things it does, and we have felt this a lot over the last 5 years, is, man, time and an organization growing can cause you to want to go in 1,000 different directions. Mm-hmm. Like, it is something in all of our nature to just want to continue to launch new ministries and new stuff. And you have people in the church that say, why don't we do this? And why don't we do this? And why don't we do this? And having a real crystallized vision, so like for ours, we want to see 5,000 baptisms by 2032 and send 500 people out of Mercy Hill on mission, church planners, international missionaries, other side of the world. If you have that real clear and crystallized, you can always go back and say, okay, this thing that we're talking about doing this year, or this thing we're going to launch, or this thing, whatever, is it helping us to get there? Right. And if the answer is just like straight up, like, no, not really, like it's not helping us get 5,000 baptisms and send out 500, well, then maybe you should question, maybe we shouldn't do that, And you could do it with, staffing, the way the church is organized, where the money is going in the church. Because if you don't have something like that, like, it's not filtering all the energy of the organization, and the stuff just can kind of end up going. Right. I love to build stuff and I love to create stuff. And so, like, I'm just the worst. I mean, someone has an idea and let's do that. That'd be cool. I'm like, let's do it. Right. But that's not always that strategic. Yeah. And this kind of keeps everybody.
Yeah. We said for a long time, one of our plumb lines forever that we got from the summit was, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I think that the sentiment of that is, well, what should you? What should you do? It's like, well, you got to have some way to answer that, because just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's like, well, what should we be doing, So I think having that 10-year that's out there really helps with that. And, that's a muscle to flex, man. Like, I've had to grow a lot in this. I'm in sort of the visionary seat at Mercy Hill, and I've had to really grow in being able to kind of even see it in my own mind's eye and put a lot of thought work into that. I can sympathize with guys who might be in a smaller church thinking about this. Man, they got 100 people, 200 people. But I just think that the power of having something that's out there that we're going after and then backing up with that, man, it's just one of those things that I don't care if you're in a church of 100 or a church of 1,000, you can't, unless you're an alien, unless you're Larry Osborne of the world or whatever, I think it's hard to live without something to help what you should or shouldn't be going after.
Yeah, not only does it provide alignment, the other thing that I think it does is, if you ever heard the concept of like trying to reverse engineer something, it kind of allows for that, Like, one example that I think of is, when I drive to our church offices with just where the interstates are and stuff in Greensboro, I drive right past the airport here in Greensboro, and our church is pretty much right next to the airport. And so they've built this huge metal building almost on one of the runways. Boom Supersonic is the company, and they're trying to develop, kind of the Concorde of 2030. The Concorde was like a commercial jet that would fly between New York and whatever, the UK in 3 hours or whatever, and it would go faster than the speed of sound. And there was all these sort of technical issues they had to deal with. in terms of that. And, Concorde ended up going away, and there's actually not one of those, there's not a commercial passenger. And so they're trying to do that, I don't know what over the next 10 years or whatever. So, I mean, thinking about like, okay, that's where they're going.
Right.
Now we have nothing. So we need to totally reverse engineer, and it's fun driving because like 2 years ago that building went there. And so seeing like they're building the building, and I'm sure they're coming up with plans and, starting to design engines and test, it's like, man, they're probably a long way from this, like being actually happening. But like, if you can't see, okay, supersonic passenger plane 10 years from now, if you can't see that, then you're not going to be able to reverse engineer all the way to the point of like, yeah, we need to hire these people and build the building and all that stuff.
Totally.
So just having that is a really good thing. So after kind of doing that, a lot of that is not even planning for the upcoming year. It's just making sure we're all in alignment. How did the previous year go? Where are we trying to go over the next 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever. And then after that, it's trying to break it up into more bite-sized chunks. You're still not in like, quarterly or yearly sort of thing. You're saying, okay, if this is going to happen 10 years from now, what needs to happen over the next 3 years? Mm-hmm. And you just kind of keep going from there. I think it's a good place to kind of stop this discussion and just kind of pick it up in the next episode. This gave you guys hopefully a lot of stuff to think about in terms of like, okay, how did 2024 go? And what lessons can be learned? Where did God really answer our prayers? Where are areas that we need to grow? And then hopefully some challenge around, vision and stuff. If you guys don't have that vision for 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever it may be, maybe some stuff to think about. You need that stuff to be able to kind of go into some of that more 1 year, 3 year planning. So we'll stop from there and then just pick it up in the next episode talking about, okay, how do you create a 3 year plan? How do you create a 1 year plan? And then ultimately the goal is, what do we need to be doing this week? What do we need to be doing over the next couple of months? Anything else you want to?
Oh, no, I would just say, let's pick it up again. And hey, guys, if you don't know this, we have a private Facebook group, and we talk about all this kind of stuff, super practical things that help churches grow so that they can go, which is our ultimate goal here at Breaking Barriers, to help a lot of churches on that journey. So check that out too. Thanks.